What happens when Hollywood's most iconic tough guy walks back into the lion's den of daytime television, only to face off against a host who's been waiting years for revenge? The answer unfolded beneath the blinding white studio lights of The View, and for a few unforgettable minutes, daytime television stopped feeling polite, and started feeling dangerous. The studio that morning felt different. There was a charge in the air, something subtle but undeniable. Studio 1A was always kept slightly cooler than comfortable, a calculated chill to counter the heat of the lights, but today, even before the cameras rolled, there was another kind of cold. The kind that settles in when everyone knows something volatile is about to happen. The audience filed in, murmuring, clutching coffee cups and smartphones. Producers moved with rehearsed urgency, whispering into headsets, adjusting cue cards, double-checking camera angles. Stagehands wiped invisible dust from the iconic curved table as if polishing a battlefield before war. At the center of it all sat Joy Behar. She flipped through her notes slowly, deliberately. Her lips were pursed into a thin, almost surgical smile. 3 years. 3 years since the last encounter. 3 years since that moment that had sparked headlines and endless panel debates. The memory still lingered, not like a wound, but like a bruise that never quite faded. A production assistant leaned in. "We're live in 60 seconds. Joy nodded, her fingers tapping softly against the tabletop. Tap. 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 Across the studio entrance, a tall silhouette waited just beyond the curtain. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed as the theme music swelled, "please welcome back to the show, Academy Award-winning actor and director, A. Beat. Clint Eastwood." The audience erupted. He walked out slowly, not hurried, not hesitant, but with that unmistakable measured stride that had defined decades of cinema. Navy blazer. Crisp shirt. Simple jeans. No flash. No theatrics. Just presence. The applause was thunderous at first, admiration, nostalgia, reverence. But beneath it, there was curiosity. People weren't just here for a movie promotion. They were here for tension. Eastwood shook hands with the co-hosts one by one, his grip firm but economical. When he reached Joy, their handshake lingered half a second longer than necessary. Her smile was polished, professional. His was restrained, unreadable. They sat. The cameras zoomed in. "So, Clint," Joy began lightly, folding her hands. "It's been about 3 years since your last visit." "Something like that," he replied, his gravel-toned voice calm, almost casual. The studio lighting glinted faintly against his silver hair. He looked relaxed, too relaxed. "Well," Joy continued, tilting her head slightly, "a lot has changed since then. We had quite the spirited discussion about politics last time." A subtle shift rippled through the panel. The other co-hosts exchanged brief glances, quick, instinctive. The audience quieted almost instinctively. Eastwood leaned back slightly, crossing one leg over the other. "I remember." Joy's smile sharpened. "I've been thinking about that conversation. Especially about your views on celebrities staying out of politics. Have you had any time to reconsider?" There it was. Not loud. Not aggressive. But loaded. Eastwood's eyes narrowed just slightly, not enough for outrage, but enough for recognition. The kind of look he once gave before drawing first in a Western standoff. "I don't reconsider principles," he said evenly. "If they're principles." A murmur rolled through the audience. Joy leaned in. "Interesting. Because some people might say that standing at a national convention and talking to an empty chair crosses into theatrical politics." The temperature in the room dropped. The other co-hosts went still. Eastwood didn't blink. "That was a convention. I was invited as a citizen." Joy's laugh came quickly. "A citizen who happened to be performing." A camera cut to the audience, several faces leaning forward. Eastwood tilted his head slightly. You use this platform every day to discuss politics. Yes, Joy said sharply. We do. You wrap it in entertainment, he replied, voice steady, but it's politics all the same. The air felt heavier now. Dense. Joy's fingers tightened around her mug. We provide a forum for important discussions. And I expressed an opinion, Eastwood said. That's democracy. But in a way that made you look, she paused, choosing her words carefully, or perhaps not carefully enough. Unhinged. A visible flinch from one of the co-hosts. Eastwood's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Unhinged, he repeated. Silence. The camera zoomed slightly closer. The audience wasn't clapping now. No laughter. No polite reaction. Just stillness. Joy leaned back, attempting casual composure. Talking to a chair on national television, you can't blame people for questioning it. Eastwood exhaled slowly through his nose. Comedy doesn't always land with everyone. But it wasn't just comedy, Joy pressed. It was political commentary disguised as performance. And what is this? He asked quietly. The question hung in the air like smoke. Joy blinked. This show, he continued, gesturing around him, is it journalism? Entertainment? Or political commentary disguised as discussion? A low murmur spread across the audience. The producers in the control room shifted uneasily. Joy straightened. We ask tough questions. Tough questions, he nodded. Or personal attacks. A flicker, just a flicker, of irritation crossed her face. No one is attacking you. You just called me unhinged. I said the act was. He studied her for a long moment. The tension wasn't explosive yet. It was coiled. The other co-hosts tried to redirect, mentioning his new film, asking about directing at his age, praising longevity. For a moment, it seemed the storm might pass. But Joy circled back. You've been very vocal about Hollywood staying out of politics, she said, voice tightening again. Yet you've never shied away from using your influence when it suits you. Eastwood leaned forward slightly now. Influence cuts both ways. And accountability, she shot back. A producer whispered urgently in someone's earpiece. The audience felt it, the shift from debate to confrontation. Eastwood's voice dropped half an octave. Accountable to who? To the public. Or to you? The question landed harder than expected. Joy's lips parted, then pressed thin again. The cameras caught everything, the tightening of her jaw, the slight tremor in her fingers, the narrowing of his gaze. This was no longer a promotional interview. This was personal. The studio lights felt hotter now. Or maybe it was just the pressure rising. Somewhere in the back row, someone whispered, "Oh my God." Joy inhaled slowly, steadying herself. You think we're ambushing you? Eastwood didn't smile. I think you've been waiting for this. The room went still. Even the hum of equipment seemed louder. Joy's eyes flashed. That's ridiculous. Is it? A beat. Because from the moment I walked in, he continued quietly, this hasn't felt like a conversation. The audience shifted in their seats. This was it, the edge of the cliff. Joy's composure thinned further. We're allowed to question you. And I'm allowed to answer. Her tone sharpened. Without being challenged. He held her gaze. I don't mind being challenged. The pause stretched. I mind being insulted. A ripple moved through the crowd. Joy opened her mouth again, and that was the exact moment the air changed. Not louder. Not yet. But heavier. Something irreversible had just cracked beneath the surface. And in the control room, a producer muttered quietly, "Don't cut. Let it run." The lion's den had closed its gates. And neither of them was backing down. What happens when a tense exchange stops being television, and starts becoming personal? The shift was almost invisible. Not loud. Not explosive. Just a fracture beneath the surface, the kind that spreads silently through glass before it finally shatters. The studio lights hummed overhead, hot and unblinking. The air conditioning whispered faintly against the tension, but it wasn't enough to cool what was building at that curved table. Clint Eastwood hadn't moved. Joy Behar had. It was subtle, a tightening of the shoulders, a firmer grip on the mug, the way her foot tapped once beneath the desk before going still again. "I did not insult you," Joy said carefully, her voice clipped now. Controlled. "I said the performance was questionable." Eastwood tilted his head slightly. "You called it unhinged." "I said some people perceived it that way." "And you repeated it." The audience exhaled collectively. The other co-hosts were no longer participating, they were spectators now. Their cue cards rested untouched. Their smiles had faded into careful neutrality. Joy leaned forward, abandoning the softer tone. "You stood at the Republican National Convention and had a conversation with an empty chair. You can't be shocked that people criticized it." A beat. Eastwood's expression hardened, not loud, not theatrical, just still. "That convention," he said evenly, "was an invitation." "And this isn't?" she shot back. The words landed. Eastwood's eyes sharpened. "I was invited to promote a film." "And you're promoting it," Joy replied. "We're also discussing your public actions." "Discussing," he repeated. He leaned forward now. "Or prosecuting." The word struck like a dropped glass. The audience murmured again, louder this time. Joy's composure flickered. "We're not prosecuting anyone," she snapped. "We're asking legitimate questions about responsibility. When celebrities speak politically, it matters. And when talk show hosts do it," he asked quietly. Her eyes flashed. "That's our job." He nodded slowly. "So you're allowed to use your platform for politics, but I'm not." "That's not what I said." "It's what you implied." Silence. A producer in the control room leaned closer to the monitors. "Ratings gold. But dangerous gold." Joy's voice grew sharper now. "The difference is we're not pretending it's comedy when we criticize leaders." Eastwood's lips pressed thin. "You didn't find it funny," he said. "That doesn't make it illegitimate." It made it embarrassing. There it was. The word hung in the air like smoke. Embarrassing. A faint gasp rippled through the audience. Eastwood didn't blink. "Embarrassing," he repeated softly. "Yes," Joy said, pressing forward, sensing momentum. "It embarrassed you. It embarrassed the party. It embarrassed the country." The temperature in the studio seemed to spike. One of the co-hosts shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the floor manager. Eastwood's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Careful," he said quietly. "Careful?" Joy challenged. "Are we not allowed to call something what it is?" His voice dropped lower. "You're allowed to criticize ideas. And I am. You're attacking character." Joy's hand hit the table. A sharp crack. The coffee mugs rattled. "I am not attacking your character." The audience jolted. Eastwood didn't flinch. "You just said I embarrassed the country." "Because you did." The words echoed louder than she intended. A co-host's eyes widened. The room went still again, but now it was brittle. Eastwood leaned back slowly, crossing his arms. "Is that what this is about?" he asked. "Patriotism?" Joy's breath quickened slightly. "It's about accountability." "Accountable to you?" "To the public." He leaned forward again, deliberate. "Who elected you?" A sharp intake of breath from somewhere in the third row. Joy's face flushed. I don't need to be elected to ask questions. And I don't need your approval to speak. The tension was no longer simmering. It was burning. Joy's voice rose. You don't get to hide behind free speech every time someone criticizes you. And you don't get to weaponize criticism into insult. Her eyes narrowed. Oh please. No one is weaponizing anything. You called me unhinged. You called it embarrassing. You implied I disgraced the country. She opened her mouth to retort, and he cut in. That's not a discussion. That's condemnation. The audience shifted again. The energy was no longer curious. It was divided. Some nodded at Eastwood's calm. Others bristled at his pushback. Joy leaned forward further now, abandoning pretense. You stood on national television talking to furniture. The room froze. Furniture. There was no cushioning the insult now. Eastwood's eyes darkened. Furniture, he repeated quietly. If that's not crazy, Joy added, I don't know what is. Gasps. Real ones. The co-host beside her whispered under her breath, Joy, too late. Eastwood's posture changed. Not explosive. Not theatrical. But final. He slowly uncrossed his arms. You just called me crazy, he said evenly. I said, you said it. Her breathing grew heavier. It was a figure of speech. Funny, he replied. That's what I said about the chair. The audience reacted, a ripple of restrained laughter, quickly silenced by tension. Joy's hands trembled slightly now. She clasped them together to steady herself. This isn't about jokes, she insisted. It's about using influence irresponsibly. And what are you doing right now? Defending standards. By insulting a guest. She inhaled sharply. You're not above criticism. And you're not above restraint. A long pause. The camera zoomed in, close enough to see the faint tightening at the corners of Joy's eyes. The faint steel in his. He leaned closer. You don't like my politics. That's not, you don't. She hesitated. I disagree with them. And that disagreement, he continued, voice controlled but colder now, gives you permission to mock. I'm not mocking you. You called me crazy. She hesitated again. The silence stretched so long it became uncomfortable. In the control room, someone whispered, we're past the point of pulling it. Eastwood's tone sharpened for the first time. You think because this table faces the audience that you control the room. Joy's eyebrows shot up. I do control the room. And that was it. That was the crack becoming a fracture. Eastwood slowly stood. Not abruptly. Not angrily. But deliberately. The audience gasped, louder now. At 6'4", his frame cast a long shadow across the table. Joy blinked up at him. Sit down, she said, trying to sound authoritative. He didn't. You control the room, he repeated softly. You control it because people let you. Her pulse visibly quickened in her throat. This is my show. He looked around the studio, at the cameras, the audience, the bright lights. It belongs to the viewers, he said quietly. The crowd stirred. Joy swallowed hard. You don't intimidate me. He tilted his head. I'm not trying to. And somehow that was worse. The room had gone beyond tension. It was electric now, unstable. Joy's next words came out faster than she intended. You're acting like a tough guy because that's all you've ever played. A collective intake of breath. Eastwood's expression shifted, not anger yet, but something close. I don't need to play anything. You've built your entire career on that persona. And you've built yours on tearing people down. The words landed like a hammer. Joy froze. The audience erupted in a chaotic mix, some applause, some groans, some shocked silence. A co-host leaned toward her, whispering urgently, "Joy, pivot." But she didn't. "You know what?" she snapped. "Maybe if you hadn't embarrassed yourself back then." He raised a hand. Slowly. The gesture alone silenced her. "You're still angry about that," he said quietly. "I am not angry. You are." Her eyes glistened now, not weakness, but fury. "You think I've been waiting for this?" "Yes." Silence. He stepped slightly closer to the table. "You've been rehearsing this conversation for 3 years." Her composure cracked. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" The cameras caught it, the tremor in her voice. The flicker in her eyes. He continued. "You invited me here to settle something." "That's not true." "You wanted a moment." The room held its breath. "And now you've got one." Joy opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. For the first time since the interview began, she had no immediate response. And that silence was louder than anything she'd said all morning. Eastwood looked directly into the main camera. "This isn't journalism," he said calmly. "This is resentment." The audience gasped again. Joy's face flushed deeper. "You don't get to define what this is." "I just did." Her hand trembled visibly now. "You think you've won something here?" He studied her. "I'm not trying to win." A long pause. "I'm trying to remind you of something." She swallowed. "And what's that?" His voice dropped to nearly a whisper. "That respect isn't weakness." The words landed heavy. The studio felt smaller. Tighter. And the confrontation was no longer about politics. It was about pride. Joy opened her mouth again, this time angrier, more desperate. But before she could speak, he said 2 words that would change everything. "Washed up." The audience gasped, confused. Joy blinked. "What?" He stared at her. "You were about to say it." Her lips parted, then froze. The realization hit her face. Because she had been about to say it. And now. There was no going back. What happens when pride overrides preparation, when ego steps in before restraint, and when 2 people refuse to blink? It doesn't end with applause. It ends with silence. The kind of silence that hums louder than shouting. Joy Behar stared across the curved table at Clint Eastwood, and for the first time that morning, the studio lights felt too bright. "You were about to say it," he had told her. "Washed up." The word hung there, hovering between them like a loaded weapon neither had officially fired, but both had heard. The audience shifted, restless. Someone coughed. A chair creaked faintly in the back row. Joy's lips parted. "I was not," she said quickly. But her voice lacked its earlier sharpness. Eastwood didn't move. He didn't need to. "You were," he replied quietly. It was sitting right there. A long beat. And then, against every instinct of damage control, against every silent plea from the co-host beside her, Joy exhaled sharply and said it. "Fine. Maybe I was." Gasps. "You've built this image of the invincible tough guy for decades," she continued, words coming faster now, propelled by adrenaline. "And maybe sometimes it looks like you're clinging to it." The air shifted. Clinging. A more polite version. But still a strike. Eastwood's face went still. Not offended. Not explosive. Just, still. "Clinging," he repeated. Joy leaned forward, doubling down. "You've been playing the same role your entire life. The strong silent man who never apologizes, never backs down. Maybe people are tired of that." A murmur rippled across the studio. Eastwood nodded slowly. "And you," he said evenly, "have been playing yours." She blinked. The outraged moral referee, he continued. The voice of righteousness at the table. Joy's jaw tightened. That's called having convictions. And so is mine. Silence again. Then Joy made the mistake. The irreversible one. You know what? She snapped. Maybe if you weren't so busy defending your ego, you'd realize that the world has moved on. That act doesn't work the way it used to. You're not the same box office force you were. You're not untouchable. The audience reacted audibly. And then it came. Clear. Direct. Unfiltered. Maybe, she said, voice trembling with fury, you are washed up. It landed like a dropped anvil. The entire studio froze. A co-host whispered, "Oh my God," a producer muttered something inaudible in the control room. And Clint Eastwood stood up. Slowly. Not violently. Not theatrically. But with a finality that felt seismic. At full height, under the glare of the lights, he seemed larger than the room. Washed up, he repeated, his voice so low it forced everyone to lean in to hear it. Joy swallowed. There was no smirk now. No superiority. Just tension. You think longevity is clinging? He asked. She didn't answer. You think discipline is ego? Her eyes flickered. A washed-up actor, he continued calmly, doesn't direct Academy Award-winning films. A ripple through the audience. A washed-up actor doesn't have studios calling into his 90s. His voice strengthened, not louder, but fuller. A washed-up actor doesn't stay relevant for 7 decades. The applause began, hesitant at first, then growing. Joy looked rattled now. But you know what is washed up, he added. The room went still again. A conversation that mistakes insult for intelligence. A few audience members gasped softly. He stepped slightly closer to the table. You want accountability, he continued. Here's some. If you disagree with someone's politics, debate their ideas. Don't attack their character. Joy tried to speak, but he raised a hand, calm, commanding. Calling someone crazy. Calling them washed up. That's not journalism. Her face flushed deep red. That's frustration. Silence. And frustration, he said quietly, usually means you're losing. The crowd reacted audibly now, divided but captivated. Joy's voice cracked slightly. You don't get to define what this show is. He turned slowly, gesturing at the set. This show has influence. Influence requires restraint. You're lecturing me. No, he said calmly. I'm reminding you. She stared at him, eyes glassy now, though whether from anger or humiliation, no one could tell. You came here to promote a movie, she whispered. I came here for a conversation. The distinction echoed. He looked around the studio, at the audience, at the cameras, at the crew frozen in place. You turned it into a reckoning. A beat. And you weren't ready for one. The silence that followed was absolute. The kind of silence that makes people aware of their own breathing. Joy looked down at the table. For the first time, she had no comeback. No clever line. No sharp retort. Just stillness. One of the co-hosts finally spoke softly. Maybe, we all escalated this. But it was too late for soft landings. Eastwood straightened his blazer. You asked for accountability, he said calmly. Here it is. He looked directly at Joy. Respect doesn't weaken your argument. It strengthens it. Her eyes lifted slowly. There was something different there now. Not surrender. Not agreement. But realization. The audience began applauding, uneven, unsure, but undeniable. Joy inhaled deeply. I shouldn't have said that, she admitted quietly. The room seemed to exhale. Eastwood studied her face for a long moment. "Are you sorry for saying it?" he asked evenly, "or sorry it didn't land the way you expected?" A painful pause. She didn't answer immediately. And in that hesitation, the truth was visible. He nodded once. "That's what I thought." He turned toward the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said calmly, voice steady, "this was educational. But I think I'll promote my film somewhere else." A nervous laugh flickered through the audience. He glanced back at Joy. "Next time you want a fight," he added softly, "make sure you're ready for one." And then he walked. Not rushed. Not storming. Just steady, measured steps toward the exit. The audience parted slightly as he passed. The studio lights suddenly felt colder. Joy remained seated. Hands folded. Eyes distant. The co-host beside her leaned in gently. "Joy." But she didn't respond immediately. The cameras lingered on her face, not triumphant, not defeated, but reflective. For the first time that morning, there was no performance. Just consequence. The screen faded to commercial. And across social media, clips of the exchange began exploding in real time. Some praised Eastwood's composure. Some defended Joy's willingness to challenge. But everyone agreed on one thing: daytime television had never felt this raw. The lion's den had not claimed its prey. It had revealed its teeth. And sometimes, that's more powerful. If you watched this entire confrontation unfold, let me ask you something. Was this about politics? Or was it about pride? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Who crossed the line first? Who handled it better? I want to hear your take. If you enjoy deep, cinematic breakdowns of explosive live TV moments like this one, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves unfiltered drama. Because sometimes, the real show isn't scripted. And sometimes, the most powerful moments happen when the cameras don't cut.